Hello, today we're here with Jeeho Cha, an organizer of Nodutdol, to discuss Nodutdol's US out of Korea campaign, as well as the People's Summit on Korea that is happening from July 25th to the 27th. Welcome, Jeeho.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Um, so just to get to the first question, the US-based Nodutdol started the US out of Korea campaign nearly a year ago on July 29th, 2024. Can you explain your slogan, US out of Korea? Like, what are the main demands? What have your activities been so far, and what are you planning for in the future?
So we started the US out of Korea campaign last year on July 27th, which was the 71st anniversary of the signing of the Armistice Agreement to end, but not end, the Korean War. Um, and the slogan US out of Korea really emerges from our analysis and conviction that US imperialism is the key barrier to the liberation and sovereignty of the Korean people. That in order for the liberation of Korean people to be achieved, the United States must leave Korea, and the apparatus and apparati that enable US imperialism to exist in Korea must be dismantled. We have four key demands that clarify our position. The first demand is actually eponymous with our campaign name. We call for the US out of Korea, the full and permanent withdrawal of US troops and weapons systems from Korea, and that all Korean land, water, and airspace currently appropriated for the US military be returned to the Korean people. And through this demand, we're calling attention to the nearly 80 years of US military occupation that the Korean Peninsula has endured, dating immediately after the end of Japanese colonialism. And Tan, you may know, and your audience may also know that today the US has 28,000 troops across 60 military bases in Korea, including in Camp Humphreys, which is the US's largest military base on foreign soil. And if you know the history of Camp Humphreys and the surrounding area, you know how incredibly heartbreaking that is. 2 years ago in 2023, I and many of my comrades had the opportunity to actually visit Pyeongtaek, which is where Camp Humphreys is located, and hear from villagers and meet with local organizers who had been part of campaigns to oppose the expansion of Camp Humphreys uh, almost 2 decades ago. And to hear those stories, to understand that families, communities that had been rooted in that area of Korea for decades, for almost a century, had lost their homes. And then immediately to see Camp Humphreys and see the golf course that replaced those homes, those fields, was quite infuriating. And so that's one of the ways in which we hope to advance our campaign, right? To be able to bring back some of those lessons from visiting Korea and to really highlight the impact of US military occupation through this specific demand to call for the full and permanent withdrawal of US troops and for that all land, water, and airspace appropriated be returned back. And the other part of this demand is that South Korean taxpayers actually foot part of the bill for the United States to occupy their land, right? And this amount has increased just recently. There's been agreements and negotiations started under Biden and established under Biden in 2024 to actually increase the amount of money that the South Korean taxpayers actually issue to the US military. And that special measures agreement will actually go into effect next year and includes a nearly 10% increase of what had been appropriated already for the US military to stay in South Korea. And currently, that agreement is actually under renewed scrutiny as Trump has expressed some desires to actually reevaluate the cost sharing agreement there, tied to the tariff negotiations that are taking place. And so there's a possibility actually that the cost sharing may increase, and the burden will be placed even further on the South Korean people for their own military occupation.
Yeah, I suppose just going to the next question, in many regards, there's so many things that we oppose about the Trump administration, right? I think the tariffs, the various like tariff extortion that his administration is committing to, all around the world, changing the rules of the game, all these things, and as well as like all his domestic policies. But in some regards, also Trump kind of offers a certain possibility openings, right? In 2018, for example, right, there were some heated exchanges at the beginning, but eventually, US President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un began an unprecedented diplomatic engagement, right? For the first time, a US president met with North Korea's leader, and this generated great hopes in the Korean Peninsula that Trump's break with the kind of like hardline stance against North Korea might actually pave a path towards a peace treaty, right? Yet by February 28th of 2019, as we all know, Trump walked out of the talks with no deal. And yeah, there's a lot of rumors going on right now saying that Trump might meet with Kim Jong-un before the APEC summit that's happening in November. uh, what do you expect from the current Trump administration? And also, just how do you negotiate uh, as a social movement in the United States? How do you negotiate both seeing Trump as offering opportunities and openings in around the Korean issue, while at the same time, like opposing a lot of his domestic policies that are like wreaking havoc in immigrant communities, and just working class communities. Yeah, so that's yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you. This is a really great question. And I think to understand this question, it is helpful to actually go back to that peace process that was started in 2018, 2019, and to be able to extricate what Trump says, and his rhetoric and what we can consider part of his political maneuverings as a form of theater and his actual administration's actions. And I think you're right, right? 2018, 2019 was a moment of great hope and possibility for a peace agreement and a path towards reconciliation between the two Koreas. Even before Trump had met with Kim Jong-un, Kim had convened the third inter-Korean summit with then South Korean President Moon Jae-in that led to some key achievements towards a path towards peace. They agreed to dismantle landmines along the DMZ, take down guard posts and towers along the demilitarized zone. And South Korea also agreed to stop loudspeakers that were spewing propaganda across the border. And these agreements also came with some outlines of plans to declare an end to the Korean War, as well as to establish new linked railway systems between the North and South. And so that actually came about from the inter-Korean summit between Moon and Kim. And during this time, Trump outwardly espoused a desire to support these negotiations and initiatives, as well as engage in diplomacy and negotiation with North Korea. But in reality, the US interfered with the plans outlined by the two Koreas. The US military, through its control of the demilitarized zone, interfered and obstructed the creation of the joint railway. And the US also interfered with projects to introduce tourism between the Koreas with the excuse that it would violate sanctions. And at the Hanoi summit that you referenced in 2019, in conversations about denuclearization for North Korea, as well as the lifting of sanctions on behalf of the United States, the US actually refused to ease sanctions, even partially. Instead, Trump demanded that North Korea denuclearize without any commitment to lifting sanctions in return. And so, yes, it's true that Trump met with Kim not just once, but twice, that his officials met with many North Korean officials and engaged in processes of negotiation with possibilities towards the path towards peace, and also signaled a lack of good faith and a commitment to follow through on whatever diplomatic negotiations may have come about from even the Hanoi summit or the Singapore summit. And this, to me, illustrates what Trump's approach will likely be to Korea in his second term. You've all referenced those rumors and the possibility that Trump would like to meet with Kim before APEC. And he's hinted at restarting talks with North Korea time and again. But still, the actions of his administration make clear that he has no interest in true peace and diplomacy. Since coming into office, if we actually take a look at the actions of his administration, he's expanded military drills taken between the US and South Korea, as the Freedom Shield exercises that are held annually in March were even larger in scale. He's reaffirmed the US's commitment to bilateral and trilateral military alliances between the US, Japan, and South Korea. And again, as I was referencing earlier, has gestured to renegotiating the military cost sharing agreements to make South Korea foot an even bigger cost for the US presence in Korea. And taken together, these actions actually indicate a desire to heighten aggression against US aggression against North Korea, as well as to entrench South Korea even further in the lattice network that the US is creating to encircle China. And of course, this podcast is called The New Cold War. And I think it behooves us to understand South Korea's role within that and what US aims to do, utilizing South Korea to showcase aggression against North Korea, but also utilize its strategic position within South Korea to encircle China and its path towards war. And I think one thing that has come about in these discussions over the past couple of months is the possibility of redeploying the United States forces, Korea, and strategic flexibility to elsewhere in the Indo-Pacific region. But even if that were to happen, it's actually quite clear that Korea is a key linchpin to the US's plans in the region and its encirclement of China. Earlier this year in May, USFK leader Xavier Brunson stated that South Korea is the US's fixed aircraft carrier floating in the water between Japan and mainland China, and that Korea is the main ally actually on the continent, sharing waters with China and its closest position to Beijing. And so, there's a lot of talk coming out of the administration. There's a lot of things that Trump will say. And also, I think it's critical for us to understand his actions and what they indicate to us as the truth behind what his goals and aims are. And really, all of that is part of advancing the US imperial agenda, regardless of whether Biden was in office or now Trump being in office. The US is aiming to maintain its position atop imperialism, utilizing its proxies, including the Zionist entity in Israel. And that's how we understand the devastating genocide that it's supported and has waged against the Palestinian people, and its unflinching support of the Zionist entity in order to actually maintain its imperial foothold there. And so while our campaign specifically calls attention to the US out of Korea, and was developed and established within the specific context of the Biden administration, we see US out of Korea as still critically relevant to the way that Trump and likely future US presidents will advance their interests in Korea, to continue to actually push aggression against North Korea and push for regime change, as well as utilize their position in South Korea for the possibility of future conflict in the region. And that's why we've established the campaign, why in addition to demanding the full and permanent withdrawal of US troops from South Korea, we're also calling and demanding for the end of military alliances between the US and South Korea. This includes the trilateral military alliance between US, Japan, and South Korea, because we see that as one key apparatus that the US maintains its position in the Korean Peninsula, as well as demanding the end of all aggression against North Korea, the end to all joint military drills that the US and South Korea, and now with Japan, conduct together, because that is actually one way that the US is positioning itself to be prepared for war, not just against North Korea, but with China. And why we believe that people of conscience here in the US must come together to mount further resistance and opposition to US imperialism there.
Great, thank you. My question is around the summit. Could you tell us a little bit about the People Summit for Korea that will take place from July 25th to the 27th?
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer your question, I want to backtrack just a tad bit and offer some historical grounding. As you've noted, the Korean War has not formally ended, but has been suspended through a ceasefire agreement for the past 72 years. And despite efforts from Korean organizers, activists, and even both Koreas to formally establish a lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula, that goal has not been realized. For decades, US imperialism has really blocked the path towards peace, reunification, and self-determination of the Korean people. And as we've been talking about today, we're at a really critical moment where through military escalation and political interference, there's an even greater threat to peace in Korea and for the future of Korea, and the escalation towards war, not just between the two Koreas, but with even China as well. And it's at this moment that our organization, Nodutdol, alongside 9 other organizations, are convening the People's Summit for Korea towards national liberation in New York in just a few weeks. Through the summit, we aim to galvanize the movement for Korea's liberation through collective analysis, strategy, and dialogue. And we hope to expand the vision of what Korea's national liberation demands today, as well as assert Korea's place within the broader anti-imperialist movement, upholding internationalism as essential to the struggle. Through the summit, we affirm that the working people in Korea, the US, and globally share a desire for peace and dignity against governments serving imperial interests. And during the summit, we'll be offering 2 full days of programming, including panels on the state of affairs in East Asia and how the United States utilizes its position in the Indo-Pacific as part of its new Cold War against China. And we'll also touch upon the fight against imperialism in South Korea and North Korea, as well as the critical need to build a united international front against US imperialism everywhere. And on top of that, we'll feature a number of different workshops and breakouts to touch upon the role of students, labor, media, filmmaking in the struggle for Korea's national liberation, as well as a survey of sanctions deployed against North Korea, the historical US-based movement against the Korean War, and anti-base struggles in South Korea, as well as an array of other topics. And we'll end the weekend with a rally on July 27th, again, marking the 72nd anniversary of the Armistice Agreement to demand the full liberation of the Korean people. And of course, for folks who are in New York or can make it to New York, You're invited to attend. We're very excited to have the endorsement of over 100 organizations, with many of those members, organization members being able to attend, as well as others who are committed and interested in building this movement for Korea's national liberation. And for those who can't attend, we will be offering a live stream with details forthcoming. So we're really excited to be able to convene together in July, and then also together chart out a future path towards Korea's national liberation, because we see that as a critical and important starting place, but not the only thing that will help advance our movement together.
Great. Thank you so much. And yeah, we're gonna keep updated on the People Summit that you're doing, and we're very excited for all the work that you're doing at Nodutdol. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, Tan.